All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing our Week 3 Friday and Thursday game predictions. Of course, that's going to be headlined by a major ranked one, a Big 12 non-conference matchup, actually, between Kansas State and Arizona. Some scheduling differences or whatever going on with that one to make it a non-conference clash here in Manhattan. 20th ranked Wildcats, number 14, KSU. Nick, this is an interesting game. 7-point line right now in favor of KSU. Arizona started the year high. Noah Fafita, Tetarola McMillan, these guys were on one. A complete heater in week 1 against New Mexico in a game that was a complete shootout. This past week, though, against Northern Arizona, only $173 passing, only scored 22 points. McMillan was held in check. I just don't get it. He only had 11 yards on 2 receptions after 300-plus in the opener. Now you're facing a defense that, was in terms of secondary, they were not very good against Tulane. 120th in FBS right now, and 30-plus yard pass plays allowed. The 2 safeties in Jordan Riley and VJ Payne weren't very good in coverage. This is a secondary that was very good last year, and they have a lot of veterans, so that's very disappointing. Corner Jacob Parrish did play a very good game, though, and he's going to have duties of trying to slow down McMillan. You think both teams will probably get back on track. Obviously, one was against an FCS opponent, and this one on the road against a very good group of 5. So I think for Kansas State, coming back home, that's certainly going to be something they want to try, and, they got to be better in, is against the passing attack of Arizona that has proven the ability to spark big plays, Nick, and do that in a consistent manner downfield. And you think this is a matchup Arizona's going to try and take advantage of? Where do you stand on this one? The passing attack against the KSU secondary, neither looked great last week. Both are better, capable of a lot more. So it's kind of odd going into this game, and it's hard to break down who's going to be the more standout. I like to think the home team is going to get back on track, though.
There certainly is some disappointment if you're an Arizona Wildcats fan, only beating Northern Arizona, that is, by 12 points. So they are a solid FCS team, and some people are looking at this matchup as a matchup to keep an eye on because there have been some times in the past when Northern Arizona has kept up with Arizona and fought with them. The offense was not phenomenal in this game. I thought Fafita really didn't look great. 173 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 361 total yards of offense. Not great. They didn't have an incredible time of possession stat either. It was nearly 50-50 between them and the Lumberjacks. So certainly a little bit of concern if you're an Arizona fan. But this offense is dynamite, and there's a lot they can do. They put up 61 points against New Mexico for a reason, which was really solid so far between those 2 games. They're averaging 41.5 points per game, so a solid number. That's 25th in the nation through 2 games so far. While Fafita's looked really good, 64% comp rate, nearly 600 yards passing, 5 touchdowns. He does have 2 picks. He's been given the keys. This is his offense. He's throwing to his big target, McMillan, who's his favorite guy, who has 4 touchdowns already this season and the 315 receiving, although he had a quiet day against Northern Arizona. I think this offense will get back on track. I do foresee them scoring a fair amount of points here against this Kansas State secondary that is a weaker unit. Certainly. My concerns definitely lie with the Arizona defense, which we'll get to in a second, rather than the Arizona offense. I think this was just an off day against an FCS opponent. They're kind of, stooping down to their competition's level, not playing phenomenal football, and now they're going to get back on track and score some points against a Wildcats secondary that is very shaky.
Yeah, they're capable of a lot more, though. They played a very good game, or a very good season all of last year. And you want to look at another matchup, though, the ground attack. This is a run defense that also allowed a few big plays against Mackay Hughes and Tulane. Great linebacking room led by Austin Moore and Austin Romaine. Arizona has been very good running the ball this season. Quayle Conley and Ja'Cory Krusky-Merritt. This is a really good duo here, the left side of the offensive line for Arizona. That's the part you want to look at, at left tackle, Jonas Avinia, and then Wendell Moe at left guard. These guys are the standouts for them up front. That's certainly, an area they're going to want to lean on against the defensive line. I think it's not all that great for talent. They're kind of strapped there. One of their best players, Brendan Mott's, kind of been disappointing this year. Cody Stuffle being a veteran who's played a good bit. This is an incredibly deep linebacking room, though, and I think they can certainly also be better against the run. Like you said, shaky, Nick, and that's kind of something that's happened so far this year, at least in this past game. It was pretty disappointing for Kansas State, and this is not exactly a great get-back-on-track game, but being at home with the talent they do have in the middle and in the secondary, I like to think that they can play a lot better football. But do you think the balance for Arizona is going to be, hard for them to do that? Because they have had 9 sacks through 2 games, so the pass rush has certainly been a good unit. And this will be a great test against that aforementioned left side. And Eli Munson at right guard has been an elite pass blocker so far. So if this pass rush is nowhere to be found, they're already giving up yards. They could be in for some hell in this game.
could certainly be an issue for this linebacking core that's looked shaky, and secondary looks shaky so far this season. They're giving up 16.5 points per game through 2 games. A lot of that's carried by, blowout performance against FCS opponent. 27 points given up on the road at Tulane to a pretty decent offense on the road. Isn't terrible when I look at it, but I am concerned about something that's happened with this defense. There has been some issues so far that slightly worries me with this Wildcats defense. Now you're going against a very talented passing attack and a running back room for Arizona that's had some success so far this season. Quail Conley has 202 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns on the ground. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt has 106 yards rushing and a score so far. So this unit has got 4 rushing touchdowns so far through 2 games, and now they're going against a linebacking core and a secondary and a defensive line as well that has not had the best season. I worry about the matchup a little bit. I would like to see some balance out of Arizona. I'd like to see them be able to run the ball successfully here if they want to stay consistent in this game.
Yeah, I mean, for KSU, they allowed almost 500 yards, 7.5 yards per play. They did have a big stop to end the game in the final few seconds. There was a touchdown score that ended up getting called back, though, on a very questionable call, though. They did end up coming through at the end of the game. That's all that matters. And, of course, a fumble recovery touchdown when they were getting drove on. So they certainly stepped up in big moments. They'll need to be better in this one, though. Looking at the Kansas State offense versus the Wildcat defense. Avery Johnson completing about 66%, less than 200 yards in both games so far, 77 rushing for him. Been a pretty quiet year for the young phenom so far. This team's going to want to run the ball, Nick. It's quite simple there. Johnson has a lot of speed. Of course, you have a phenomenal running back duo in terms of versatility in DJ Giddens, who has been a massive producer already, and then Dylan Edwards, who on limited touches has been very efficient. In Arizona, they got smoked by a rushing quarterback, Devon Dampier, in New Mexico, back in week 1. They do have 2 good linebackers in the middle as well. They have combined for 8 missed tackles already this year, though, that being Tate Brown and Jacob Masu. So this is an interesting matchup, and one I think they can take advantage of, Nick, because, again, they were getting burned just a couple of weeks ago by a running quarterback, and this is one here that has a far better supporting cast and offensive line. They'll bring physicality to you. I'm not a big believer in this Wildcats D-line. They have a lot of transfers outside of Trey Smith, who I feel good about. I don't know who else is going to rush the passer for him. It's a lot of rotation right now. They're trying to figure out who's going to be the go-to guys on this D-line outside of him. So I think this is an area where they can certainly expose Arizona, and I think that this rushing attack's probably going to be in for a field day. And again, Giddens, Nick, I know you're going to read the numbers in a minute. Massive producer so far. This guy is a good ball player.
TJ Giddens is a really talented player for this Kansas State offense that has been slightly disappointed so far for me. 37.5 points per game. I want to see a little bit more out of this unit. I think they can score more than that early on. There's a lot of talented players on this team. Avery Johnson has been phenomenal so far this season, but Giddens has held up his end of the bargain. 238 yards rushing, 7.4 yards per attempt, as well as 7 receptions for 69 yards, about 10 yards per grab, and a touchdown for him. So Giddens has been really solid. Dylan Edwards has been good in the red zone as well. He has 9 touches, and 2 of those were for touchdowns, 97 total yards rushing, plus a receiving touchdown as well on 3 grabs. So the running backs are certainly being a strong part of this offense. Avery Johnson as well. He's got 77 yards on 11 carries, 65% comp rate, 334 for him, and 4 touchdowns plus a pick. I want to see a little bit more out of Johnson. I've been a little disappointed so far. Been a little disappointed in the wide receiving room as well. Hasn't quite been phenomenal. Dante Cephas, I need to see more out of him. Need to see a little bit more across the board. Cephas has not done really anything so far for this offense. And then when you look at the rest of the unit, Will Swanson, Braden Lofton, I want to see some more targets for them and some more, some better opportunities as well. I like what they can do on the ground, though. This is certainly a very strong Wildcats rushing attack, and they're going to go out here and try and attack this Arizona defense on the ground. We saw New Mexico have success on the ground against Arizona. I think Kansas State can have a lot of success between Johnson and the 2 backs there. Really nice opportunity for them to run up and get a lot of yards, chew some clock, and hold some possession against a team in Arizona that has struggled to hold the possession in their first 2 games.
Yeah, and I think that this secondary as well, J.C. Brown, a good speedster for Kansas State. They're playing a secondary that was, full of ball hawking the end of last year. They already have a couple this season. Outside of that, Keegan Johnson, what's going to happen? I don't really, outside of, those 2 players, who are going to get the targets. I don't think there's too much here for Kansas State to really worry this Arizona secondary that has a great corner in the aforementioned Takario Davis, 2 safeties in Dalton Johnson, Gunnar Maldonado. So I don't think that they're going to be too worried back there trading Stucks even in the slot. So there's veterans. I think they're going to, add some extra bodies from the secondary to slow down this run. I think that's a big advantage that Arizona might look to try to run into their favor. I think if the run game is getting going, play action could be something that's a bit worrisome. So I think this is a fun matchup here. Kind of the final thoughts on the prediction. I think Kansas State, that run game really is going to take over against this D-line. I do expect a bounce back from Kansas State's defense as well. They're going to give up some yards and some points, but overall, I think they're going to slow down the big plays to a lesser rate than last week. The secondary, they just, they underperformed, and it's time to get back on track. We're going to see some extra bodies in the secondary getting closer to the ball, and that's going to allow Kansas State to hit those big plays downfield, even though it will only be a couple of them. They'll be able to keep these drives going and allow them to stay on the scoreboard and in front. So I'm going to take Kansas State in this game to cover, Nick. Arizona, I think a lot of people were hype on them before last week, where they just put up a dud, basically. And I think that both teams are going to be back on track in a certain regard. I think you're going to see plenty of good and plenty of ugly overall competitive football game. There's going to be plenty of takeaways from this one. I'll stick with the Wildcats at home, though, getting a bounce back on defense.
I'll take Kansas State to win in Manhattan as well. I like this team to cover the 7 points. This is a fun match. I think these are two very exciting teams in a non-conference game, in quotes, of course. Friday night, nice game in the spotlight there. You're going to keep an eye on. A lot of people will be able to watch this game on Fox. I think this is a very fair match, a very balanced matchup. I like Kansas State to come out swinging. I want to see more to Avery Johnson as a passer, although I think they will dominate on the ground between Giddens and Edwards and get the job done. Hold a lot of possession here. Arizona's been struggling to hold possession, which I think will certainly be part of their downfall, though I do think Fafita and McMillan could burn some big plays against this secondary, which is why I do have Arizona scoring 30 points. I like the over in this one. Certainly, I think 57.5 is a bit of a low number for these two teams. This is a fun matchup between two ranked teams, primetime Friday night. Certainly looking forward to watching this matchup.
And of course, that was the headlining game for the Thursday-Friday slate. So we're going to go ahead and backtrack a little bit, moving to our next one. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time Thursday night, Arizona State travels to San Marcos to take on Texas State. A game that we circled before the season started, Nick, because we felt like this was a good spotlight for G.J. Kinney in the Bobcats. Arizona State, they've been pretty good en route to a 2-0 start. 2-point favorites for them, 58.5 is the total. This is going to be an interesting one. The offense for ASU has looked good this year. Through the air, though, Sam Leavitt only had 69 passing yards versus Miss State. He's only completed about 57% this year. Pass game was good in the opener against Wyoming, but last week it was no good at all. Texas State secondary has been all kinds of inconsistent. They're 132nd in FBS and 40-plus yard passing plays allowed with 4 already this year. They also ranked 10th in opponent completion rating, though, on 84 passing attempts, which is one of the higher marks in FBS. So they're facing a lot of attempts, not allowing too much, but when they are allowing completions, Nick, they're big ones downfield. Face some real tough pass catchers here for Arizona State, though, and I think this is where they can potentially maybe reel this game back in with their passing attack, is what they do have, and that is through the air. And some of the guys that, are getting on the field for them, Kyson Brown, Jordan Tyson has plenty of speed. Melquan Stovall is a veteran. Xavier Gilroy, I think this is a good player. I mean, there's a nice variety of talent here for them to work with. And then, of course, Texas State's defense, they're going to have to find some pass rush. Ben Bell is a tremendous player off the edge. Tavian Coleman's a good player on the interior D-line. The interior O-line has been a pretty solid unit for the Sun Devils this year. The offensive tackle is not as much, especially at left tackle. Joshua Adkins has been a bit of a struggle, some area for them. Biggest thing to watch, though, is Cam Scadaboo. On the other hand, he flat out carried against MSU. 262 rushing, another 35 through the air. I mean, that's a clinic of a performance. Texas State, they've been great versus the run so far, but to get a great test here to see, what they're made of, because they're a bit of a poor unit last year against the run. A couple of transfers have come in. Tumais Adalai and linebacker James Neal have been good enforcers, mixed in with a second-year player, Khalil Alexander, stepping up immensely. So I don't think the run defense improvement is a fluke, Nick, but will they be good enough to slow down Scadaboo? And do you think this passing attack is going to go off like I kind of imagine it might?
It's a very interesting matchup between Arizona State and Texas State. Texas State getting some love. Some people, I saw a few people predicting them to make the playoff in their updated brackets as the group of 5 teams, certainly possible, as they're off to a 2-0 start, including a beatdown of UTSA this past week, while Arizona State, they beat Mississippi State, an SEC team. Very interesting game. They also beat down on Wyoming, who a lot of people are high on in the preseason. So that's an interesting, resume for the Sun Devils, who a team that not a lot of people were very high on. They opened the year 2-0, and now they travel on the road to Texas State. Looking at this offense so far for Arizona State, Scadaboo's been phenomenal, right? He's really been able to run the ball effectively so far and has been the key piece for this offense. 7.1 yards per carry, 311 yards for him on the ground, as well as 52 yards receiving through 2 games. I like what he's been able to do. Only has 1 touchdown. Certainly would like to see him get some more touchdowns in the red zone, but Scadaboo is an incredibly talented back who looks to be the key here for this offense. Is can Scadaboo have a really strong day against Texas State? Sam Leavitt so far for Arizona State's not been terrible, right? 57% comp rate's not phenomenal, but 2 touchdowns, no picks, 327 yards passing. Spreading the wealth a little bit, targeting a couple different receivers here and there. Jordan Tyson has 6 grabs. Kason Brown has a touchdown on 2 grabs, 73 total yards for him. So he's had some big plays early on. I like what this offense can do. I don't think it's a very bad unit at all. I've been impressed so far. 78 points through 2 games, 39 points per game against their opponents. 48 points against Wyoming was very impressive, and 30 points against State was not a bad showing either. As for the Texas State defense, this is a defensive unit that's given up 37 points, 18.5 points per game through the 2 games, but they absolutely beat down on UTSA. Didn't have a great week 1 against their lower team, Lamar. In their opening game of 27 points there certainly concerns me, and I do think they're vulnerable against the run at times as well. Certainly want to keep an eye on whether or not Scatterbo can have a very successful day. If this Arizona State offense can run the ball successfully early, and if they get some big plays through the air, Arizona State could run away with this one.
Looking at the other side of the ball, ASUD has been great so far. Struggled a bit after a big lead. They were up like 30-3 in the second half, and it ended up being a 1-score game. They've been a stonewall versus the run, though. Elijah O'Neal, Clayton Smith, Justin Woodley, these guys have been real good up front. The offensive line's been important and impressive this year for Texas State. Pass-heavy offense, though. They also like to run the ball a lot, led by a 1,300-yard rusher last year in a veteran in Ismail Mahdi, who, has been pretty good this season. They're averaging over 200 yards per contest. It's a veteran wide receiver group as well. Jordan McLeod coming over. I think this is a great fit for this offense. He was great for JMU last season. He's coming off a big game. We had 309 and 2 scores against UTSA, had another 3 and 238 in the week 1 opener. So I think Jordan McLeod's a good fit here. And, the veterans they have, guys like Chris Dawn, Joey Hobart, Jaden Williams. I mean, they really spread the wealth here. J.J. Kenny has a great offensive scheme. ASU secondary was very poor last season. They've been much improved so far. This will be a great test, though, for players like Javan Robinson and Keith Abney at corner. Miles Rouser's a real standout at safety. He's been big for them already. And then Xavier Alford has been quite good through 2 games, but still a guy who has missed a lot of time over the past couple of seasons. For Arizona State, this D looked good versus an SEC opponent, but that was also a completely transfer-loaded O-line that really hasn't even played in the SEC, Nick, so I don't think you can really make that comparison. It's not a great measuring stick for how ASU may compete versus an experienced bunch here that does have some good size. They'll also be at home. What do you think about this matchup, the TSU offense against the Arizona State defense, one that has been vastly improved, but this is a bigger test than I think Mississippi State was?
This is certainly a big test, although I have been impressed so far. They get up 30 points, 15 points per game so far through 2 games. I was impressed with the defense. I thought Miles Rousers looked really good so far this year. 15 total tackles for him overall. Xavier Alford has 6 total tackles as well in the secondary. Keyshawn Elliott's been really good. He has 12 total tackles plus a pick, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. Good numbers from him. I've been impressed with this defense. I think this defensive unit is showing some serious progress for Kenny Dillingham and company. As when you look at the offense for Texas State, Jordan McLeod's been good so far. 68% comp rate, 547 yards passing, 5 touchdowns. 2 picks, though, is a little disappointing, but outside that, McLeod's been really good. He looks comfortable in this pass-heavy offense. Ismail Mahdi as well, 182 yards rushing and a score for him. They've been able to spread the ball out. Joey Hobart has gotten a lot of targets, 143 yards receiving, 14.3 yards per grab, and 2 scores, while Chris Dawn Jr. has 2 touchdowns, 163 yards per grab, and 23.3 yards per those 7 receptions. This offense for Texas State is a very strong unit that has a lot of different pieces in there, guys that have been around the game for a while, some transfers they added, including McLeod, who has looked really good so far. This is a matchup where, this secondary for Arizona State, they got to be strong here. They have to prevent the big plays, keep the game in front of them, try to force Texas State to run the ball and stuff the run. I like what they have in the secondary. I think it's a good unit, but will they be able to stand up against this test? Certainly going to be one to keep an eye on.
I think Texas State, they're going to have better balance than the previous 2 opponents for Arizona State. I think the passing game will be tough to slow down. On the other hand, I think ASU will also make some big plays through the air. And of course, Scatterbo's going to do his thing. I'll take the Bobcats in a shootout, as their pass rush will be able to spark just a few more stops, I think. Not really sure why the total is so low. Seems like offense is written all over this one with the 2 run games, though it's possible. The clock is drained like crazy, but I see the passing games again finding, plenty of big plays, and they're going to have their abilities too. So we're taking wild scores here, Nick, 58.5. These clear that with ease. You're going to stick with the Sun Devils. I'm going to take the home team Bobcats. I picked them in the preseason to get the job done. I'm going to take TSU to get it done in this one at home on a great Thursday night thriller. What's the reasoning for the Sun Devils, though, getting the vid here?
Yeah, I don't feel phenomenal about this pick. Certainly one that think is more of a toss-up. I think Scadubush is going to have a great day. He's going to attack that middle of the defense there for Texas State, get some really solid runs. I think they'll be able to find some big plays as well in the passing game, target some of their star receivers. And I think that the secondary for ASU will come up, make a big turnover on McLeod or two to prevent them, stop a drive, kill some momentum. I think Rouse is going to have a really good game. I trust that secondary for Arizona State here. It's obviously a big test. I think they're going to be up for it and get that stop that will bail them out and get them over the line this game. The Sun Devils, they've looked good so far. Definitely impressing me. Look a lot better than I thought they were going to. This is a big test on the road. I could see it going either way, but I'm going to rock with the favorite. I'm going to rock with Arizona State in this one. I think the Sun Devils get it done Thursday night.
And moving back to Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN, UNLV-Kansas. Another little interesting game here. Jayhawks coming off a close loss on the road to Illinois. I like a lower scoring game in this one. I think these two corners, Mello Dotson and Kobe Bryant, they're going to lock down these elite receivers, Jacob DeJesus and Ricky White, Matthew Sluka. He's been good so far, but he's still, an FCS transfer going on the road here against Kansas, who's looking for a bounce back. I certainly think things will be a little bit tougher than they have been in the first two games for him. A guy who's very good at running the ball, a dual threat quarterback for the Rebels, and they've certainly answered the call for quarterback questions when Jade Maeva transferred out, putting up over 50 points per game. So far. They had a big game against the FCS opponent, Utah Tech. 72 points, 503 rushing yards, Nick, almost 700 total yards of offense. That's just mean to do all that. I mean, they had a lot of different guys touching the football. This is a rushing attack that, had 195 in the opener against Houston. It looked pretty good. Greg Burrell, Michael Allen. Pretty deep running game. I think they're going to struggle here against Kansas, who they were very good against Illinois. This is a team that certainly, I think, is going to play with some pride of Lance Leopold. Certainly isn't going to stand for that. I don't think this is the strongest front six for them. I don't think they're all that good at linebacker. J.B. Brown, he was looking for improvements. Cornell Wheeler has been, pretty solid so far for them. Again, they're not all that good up front, Nick. Dean Miller, defensive end, a guy you can point to. Jeremy Robinson. Some average players are looking to get better, but they just played a very good game against the run. And again, I think these corners are going to play lockdown as well. So I think Kansas is improving on the defensive side of the ball. The biggest thing for them, though, is their offense. Daniels needs to be better. He was awful against Illinois. 3 interceptions there. Didn't do much in terms of production. Back to the other side of the ball real quick, though. I think UNLV, they're going to have about 100 yards, maybe 150 rushing or so, which is crazy to say since they've had 500-plus in their last game. I just think, even though this is a very good offensive line led by Tiger Shanks, I think Kansas will be up for the challenge in this one, force them to be very stagnant on offense. While there's too much versatility for Kansas to be bad. Daniels will be better. They had nearly 600 yards just a few months ago in the bowl game against the Rebels. I feel like they're going to roll in this matchup because the UNL defense isn't all that stout. 31-17 final score for me. I like Devin Neal to have a big game. I think these receivers, they'll, all provide plenty enough. Luke Grimm, Lawrence Arnold, Quentin Skinner, great trio there. I think this is a passing attack. It's going to have a bounce back, a lot of bounce from the Jayhawks, Nick. They should cover this one, and if they don't, Leopold's certainly going to be very frustrated because this team hasn't looked all that great so far.
This is a fascinating matchup on Friday night. This game is being played at Children's Mercies Park, which is home to the MLS's Sporting Kansas City, as the Kansas Jayhawks are getting their stadium worked on this year. So they're splitting games between a couple different venues down there in the Kansas City area. They played in the stadium against their FCS opponent Linwood on that Thursday to open up the season as well. So they're playing in a soccer stadium. Interesting configuration. If you look at it on TV, check it out. I think it's a very cool little design they have as a temporary measure as they rebuild that stadium. They're playing UNLV again after beating them in the bowl game by 13 points last year in late December. Interesting matchup that was. Now Kansas returns off the back of a bad loss. They're not really been phenomenal on offense so far this season, 32.5 points per game, considering they played an FCS team, 26 points per game given up on defense, 26 points total, 13 points per game given up after they blew out their lowly competition week 1. Daniels has not looked great so far, 4 picks through 2 games, including a 3 against Illinois. Not good, 289 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 57% comp rate. They're going to have to run the ball a lot here against UNLV if they want to have success. I think it's certainly possible. Devin Neal, 213 yards rushing, 9.7 yards per carry, 2 scores for him. Expect him to have a big day here. I think he's going to have a really strong performance against UNLV. He's going to have to. Daniel Hinshaw behind him is not a terrible number 2 back either. He's got a touchdown and 105 yards rushing so far. As for the UNLV offense, this offense has obviously been lighting up the scoreboard with the 99 points so far this season, and then 49.5 points per game, which is 10th in the nation, as they've beaten down on their lowly opponent last week, and they also put up 27 points against Houston. The defense has been looking really good so far against their two opponents, 10.5 points per game, 21 total points given up. Matthew Solka, I've been, okay with him. I think the completion percentage is a concern at 46%, but 5 touchdowns is solid. Solka's also been able to run the ball, 6.5 yards per carry, 129 yards rushing, and a touchdown for him. I think the defense has also been really strong for UNLV, led by Jackson Woodard, 12 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him, plus a pass breakup. I trust Kansas in one, though. I think they're going to be able to run the ball very successfully. As long as Daniels protects the ball, doesn't make any mistakes, and they run the ball, chew clock, they should be able to knock off the Rebels in a very interesting out-of-conference matchup taking place in Kansas City.
Yeah, I think 31-17. You're at 35-17, so we're kind of in the same ballpark on this one. Should be able to cover this one. I think the defense needs to step up. It's totally possible they get embarrassed, I guess, but it shouldn't happen. UNLV, pretty good football team, though. Just don't think the defense can compete here. And Daniels, he wasn't all that good in the opener against Lindenwood either. He on 15 attempts, less than 150 yards. Had an interception as well, or less than 200 yards, that is, for the whole passing attack. Nonetheless, Daniels, again, only 148, wasn't all that good. So he's looking to get back in the high gear. He's not playing very good football right now. And they don't have that other option, Jason Bean. He's not here anymore, so they can't just pass the torch. They're going to have to ride it out with him, and he'll eventually get there. He's a good playmaker. So Kansas winning this one, covering the spread. It's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me. Pretty good Thursday, Friday slate here, including a major ranked matchup that is a non-conference one. And then I think Texas State, that one on Thursday night, that's going to be a thriller as well.
This is a very interesting match, a very underrated list of 3 games here as well, as South Alabama is taking on Northwestern State FCS team Thursday night in Mobile, a game that doesn't really matter that much, though South Alabama's had a pretty disastrous 0-2 start to the season. A lot of solid teams here, Arizona State, Texas State, both of them looking really good so far. Arizona and Kansas State both look very strong as well. A ranked matchup on a weeknight is always fun to get, very rare to get that. I like that matchup. Certainly a game I'll be keeping my eye on Friday night.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.